All right, everyone, it's time for us to begin. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer as we begin our class. God, we are so grateful that your Son came to this earth and he died for our sins. We're grateful that his soul was shaken and stirred up so that our souls can be calm, knowing that you have everything under control, and that although life gets difficult sometimes, that it's all going to be made right when you come back, and let us spend eternity with you. Help us, Lord, as we study your word today, that we'll study it with an open heart, open minds, and that we'll just be amazed at Jesus. We'll be amazed at what your Son did while he was on this earth for us. We'll be amazed at his human moments, and we'll be amazed at his divine moments. And we'll be amazed at the people in the Bible and how they interacted with him and how they processed this information. We love you. We thank you for this time that we have to study together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we are starting section number 65 in our book here. If you didn't get a book, there are a couple available in the back. So you're welcome to go back there and get one. I think there's two on the table to the right back there. So section 65 is going to be on page 91 in the book. Page 91 of the book is where we are in our study. We left off here on Wednesday, and I sort of want to go back to this. So after Jesus was finished teaching in these incredible parables about the kingdom, sitting in a boat, pushed out a little bit from shore, one of those, probably the most famous of all of those, was the parable of the soils, the hearts. And so he gave all of those incredible parables. And when it got late in the evening, the multitude was so large on the shore, going back to shore, getting out of the boat was sort of impractical because there's too many people there. So he says, let's go to the other side. And so his disciples all get in the boat. There are other little boats that go along with him. And so they're traveling to the other side of the Sea of Galilee when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this storm comes up. And the disciples thought they were going to die. I mean, it says the water was coming over the boat. The terminology that's used there, tornado, hurricane, that's the kind of terminology the gospel writers use to describe how powerful the storm is. And so, of course, they're afraid. And we talked about that. I would have been afraid too. I mean, I'm not going to say that I would have just sat there and said, oh, everything's going to be fine. You know, God, the Lord's going to take care of this. I would have been scared. I would have probably been having a bucket trying to get the water out of the boat and just panicking. And finally, they get to the point where they don't know what else to do, so they wake Jesus up. Jesus says, you of little faith, why are you doubting? And then he gets up and calms the sea. And we noted that it went from this storm to this great calm the Bible talks about. And so the disciples who started out being afraid of this incredible, powerful storm, instead of being scared of the storm now, they're a little scared of who's just said stop to the wind and the waves and it obeyed. And so I always wanted you to picture being there. Imagine being in this boat with the rest of the disciples. You just witnessed this amazing event. You thought you were going to die. Now you're in great calm. And you start talking to one another. Who is this? Yeah. Even the winds and the waves obey him. And one of the gospel writers phrases it this way. What kind of man is this? Remember, real people processing this information in real time. So they are seeing this miracle by miracle, teaching by teaching, and they're having to process all this as they go along. They haven't read the end of the story yet, so they have no idea what's going on right now. So, who is this that even the winds and the waves obey his voice? How many ways could God have answered that question? If you were God, how would you answer that question? Raise your hand if you have a good answer. This is how I would have answered the question if I were God. Here, they just ask, who is this man that even the winds and the waves obey his voice? Any thoughts? Nobody has a single thought. He could have spoke from heaven, right? This is my son. He's done that already. He'll do it again. He could have spoke from heaven. Jesus could have reasoned with them from Scripture at this particular point. There's just a ton of ways that God could have answered this question that these men are pondering amongst themselves. But he doesn't do that. Now, we also noted that there were little boats that went along with them. So the little boats probably did not hear what Jesus said. You know, the storms are loud. So even the people in the boat, they understood what Jesus said and what he did. But maybe some of these on these other boats, I mean, it's too far away. They couldn't hear. They couldn't see what Jesus did. They just know at one minute, it was just totally chaos and we thought we were going to die. The next minute, the sea was as calm as we've ever seen it in our entire lives. And so imagine all of these boats getting to shore with these conversations still going on. I don't know. I can't believe what we just saw. Part of me would be thinking this. I don't know about you. Part of me would be thinking this. Why am I privy to this? Who am I that I am one of the few people that he has chosen to be his apostle? I would have been out of my mind thinking about why me? I don't deserve this. And so as they get to shore, and just picture it in your mind, soaking wet, not knowing what's going on, just thought they were about to die. Now they saw the most amazing thing they've ever seen in their life, talking about this, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a guy with no clothes on, chains on his hands and arms, answers the question that they were just asking. This man is possessed by a multitude of demons. He sees Jesus from a long way off, and he starts running right at Jesus. Now, if you're one of the apostles, what would you do in this moment? This guy with no clothes on, chains on his hand, you know he is demon-possessed like you have never seen a demon-possessed man ever. You've just experienced all this. What are you going to do? Who's going to stand forward and protect Jesus from this guy? Anybody? How many of you are like, I think I'm doing a couple steps backwards and say, all right, he's the guy that just solved this other problem with the winds and the waves. I'll let him handle this one too. So Jesus, while this guy was running, hopefully you read all the text, as he's running, one of the writers says, Jesus had already condemned the spirit and told him to come out. So as this man runs up, he actually falls down at Jesus' feet. And he says, what have I have to do with you, Son of the Most High God? Have you come to torture me before time? So here's the answer. Not from a voice from heaven. The answer that God gave the people in the boat, the disciples of Jesus, and who is this man that even the winds and the waves obey his voice? The answer came from a man possessed by demons. The demons gave the answer. Don't you know? That's the Son of the Most High God. And so Jesus has a conversation with the demons, really. He's not really talking to the man. He's talking to the demons that had possessed the man. And they ask, please don't torment us before the time. There's a herd of pigs over there. Let us go into the pigs. And Jesus, okay, go into the pigs. And so now again, everybody can picture these stories different. That's one of the amazing things about this and how it helps our imagination. I sort of picture a Raiders of the Lost Ark scene with the spirits, are flying over from out of it and going. So all these spirits leave this man. So I don't know if it was just they were there in this man and then they left and maybe he collapses and next thing you know, you see all these pigs flying off. There's no other indication that they saw anything. So these pigs all run off the cliff. They drown into the sea. And it's not an insignificant amount of money. The number of pigs that are there. If you calculate out how much that is, that's a substantial amount of money. And the people who are there given responsibility to watch those pigs, they start to panic because they're going to have to get an account for this. And so imagine this. Going back into town, I am going to have to tell my boss that a man came, and remember that guy that was always in the cemeteries and nobody in town could control? We tried to tie him up over and over and over again, and every time we tried to chain him up, he would just break the chains, and everybody is scared to pass by him. Remember that guy? Well, there was another guy that just came on shore with a bunch of people, and that demon said he was the Son of God, And next thing we know, the demons have gone into your pigs, and your pigs have all run off the cliff and they're drowned. I don't know how many ways you can say that, and if any of them would make much sense. And so they go into town and they tell what happened. And so everybody in the town comes out. Now they have an entourage coming out to meet Jesus and his entourage. And the people that were coming out of the city to come talk to Jesus, they knew this guy who was demon-possessed. They had experienced him over and over and over again. And now they come to Jesus, and they realize what had happened. Those guys at least told the truth about the pigs. They could see that all their pigs have drowned now. Maybe they're asking other people, did that really happen? Yeah, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. And the guy now is sitting there in his right mind, right by Jesus. Everything's fine with this man. And the way they process this information is, would you please leave? We don't want you around here. Now, shouldn't a more logical thing be to give Jesus the keys to the city? I mean, this guy just did something that none of us could do. This is amazing. They don't, but they're scared of him. It's sort of reminiscent about how the people are scared to hear God's voice way back when God gives the Ten Commandments. They don't want to have anything to do with Jesus. So they ask Jesus to leave. And what does Jesus do? He leaves. The man who was possessed by the demons, he actually comes to Jesus and says, I want to go with you. And wouldn't you? I mean, I'd want to go with Jesus. I mean, he saved my life. I had no life whatsoever. I would want to go with Jesus. And Jesus gives him a very important task. He says, no, you can't go with me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and tell everyone the good things God has done for you and how he's shown you mercy. And he did do that. He went home and told his family. Could you imagine the knock on the door? You know, and look out the window, look out the little peephole and see the guy that had been your son that had been possessed by all these demons. Shut it back. Hi, everybody. He's back. But that's not the way it works. He's now in his right mind. Could you imagine when they realized this? The hugs and the kisses and the conversation. And he says, you'll never believe what happened. This guy, he told the demons to come out. And just like that, they went into a bunch of pigs. And they ran off the cliff. And he didn't only do that. It says he went to all the cities of the Decapolis. So on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. On the west side of the Sea of Galilee is Galilee. On the east side of the Sea of Galilee is the Decapolis. It's the 10-city region. And that's where he was. And it says he went from city to city telling people what the Lord had done for him. All right, so let's go ahead and answer some of the questions. We did those two. So for sections 65 and 66, raise your hand if you'd like to answer one of these questions. So let's go with the first one. What do these stories teach us about God, Christ, and ourselves? Jason.
I think it gives us a more appropriate perspective of the phrase, the fear of God.
More perspective on what?
The fear of God.
Okay.
Scripture says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and most times when we think of fearing something, we think of being afraid that it's going to hurt us. And this is, I think that's part of the fear that maybe the apostles and the people who witnessed Jesus calm the storm felt, and the same when they witnessed his command over the demons. But what it really is showing is the power of God. And our fear should stem from the fact that God is the Almighty Creator. And it's not a fear like, well, I'm afraid he's going to hurt me. It's a fear, it's being in awe. And we use the word awesome all the time to describe things that are not at all awesome. This was awesome. This should have inspired awe. And I think in that sense, awe is synonymous with fear. because you can't believe the power that this one man possesses. He has control over nature, and that changes how you look at Jesus.
So, in one sense, you have this idea. Ideally, it's a proper respect for God and awe of God. But in the moment, experiencing what's taken place, I think they were scared too, and rightfully so. And I think we would have been scared. I think it's a growing process for them, and it's a growing process for us too. So they learned one thing about Jesus, that they learned he's the Son of God for sure. That was the answer to the question with the demon-possessed man. But they learned that he can control nature, and they're going to have to connect back to this, that he was creator. He's God, right? He was there in the beginning. He's going to tell him that later, before Abraham was I am. He's going to go through all of this. And there's only one God, and there is no God who's not the creator. Does that make sense? The creator is the only God. Everything stems from that. So God created everything, so he's the only God, and there are no other gods. All right, what else do we learn about Jesus, about God, or ourselves from these two stories? The crossing of the sea and stopping the wind, and the demon-possessed man. Carrie has one. We have two microphones, so someone else raise their hand if you have a comment. Go ahead, Carrie.
That God's response to the questions from the storm, those responses might have come in unexpected ways, but in very impactful ways, because he could have, like you said, he could have just said, well, this is my son, and to those people that were there, that would have impacted those people, but in continuing into this next scenario, it influenced this guy's family and town, and anyway, so it was an unexpected sort of response to this, but it was very impactful.
Yeah, very good. So I have this. God picks very interesting ways to answer questions. And the next thing I have is, I personally think, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Bible stories and how God does that. I think God acts in such a way to make the stories amazing, to make the stories memorable, and to make the stories something you can pass on. These people would have passed this story on forever. The day that the wind was about to kill us and it stopped like that, the day that we came in contact with a man that had 1,000 demons within him, and he cast this out, they went to these pigs. And so, look at the 10 plagues. I mean, they all had a sign to the 12, to the gods of Egypt, but I think they're also, he does things that are unexpected and that are shocking, so that you can remember what happened and you can tell it, and that you will tell it. And we'll see later, over and over and over again, he'll tell people, don't go tell people. But it's like, this human desire to tell stories that are amazing keeps coming out. I do have Jason's comment about God has power even over the weather, which is an amazing thing, over the storms, nature. Jared?
I think another point is that God doesn't just tell us who he is, he shows us. And Jesus didn't just say who he was, he showed who he was. And people should have been able to draw the conclusion from the things that he did, what he was, and many people did. And we can do the same thing.
Yeah, very good. So here about Jesus. Jesus does expect us to believe in him, and does expect us to have faith. I mean, he's sort of, how can you have no faith? You've seen, he's already raised somebody from the dead at this point, right? He's worked several miracles. They should have believed that he was going to be able to handle the situation. He handled every situation perfectly. I think we are starting to see why the apostles can't imagine life without him later, and why they're so scared that he's leaving. When he says, I'm going away, and where I go, you cannot go. If I was around Jesus for 3 years and he was doing stuff like this, and I had I would feel so safe in his presence eventually. I would feel so like he can conquer anything. He's awesome. And when he says, I'm leaving, I'm going to leave you, I'm going to give you the Spirit, but you're going to be, I'd be scared. I'd be scared if I knew Jesus was leaving and he wasn't going to be around. Sometimes Jesus gives people what they want. Even the demons, he gave the demons what they wanted, but the result wasn't what they wanted. He gave the people in the town what they asked for. Leave. He left. And sometimes we have to be careful. Jesus might give us what we ask for through inaction, through not having a relationship with him, and eventually we get what we ask for. And I also like the fact that he gave this man a mission. You go tell people what God has done for you. And for us, isn't that the simplest form of evangelism there can possibly be? Just tell people what God has done in your life, how much mercy and grace he has shown you, and that's what he was expected to do here. All right, anything else on that one? Those three questions? Rory has one. What if you were an eyewitness? Any of these four questions up there that you've thought about?
I guess I just think it's interesting that, the previous miracles, acclaim, excitement, people wanted to follow him, people wanted to see more, and then these two generated fear, and I don't know that we saw that before.
Okay.
Now, because of the magnitude, they start to have fear, and it's hard for me to see that kind of reaction. I think at this point in time, I would be thinking, "Oh, I need to see more of this. I need to be around this." But it's interesting that these generated fear and caused them to send him away.
Yeah. So one of the things we have talked about, people don't like it when you take their money away from them, right? And this has happened. He's taken a bunch of money away from them, and people don't like things that are they don't understand, and they didn't understand what was going on. And I think there's something to that. That's a good point. That up to this point, it's like the miracles drew people. Now the miracles are getting to so intense, if you will, that the people are like, man, I don't even know if I can be around this guy. I don't know if he's safe to even be around. I'm a little nervous about this. That's interesting. Jason has one thing real quick.
I think, one, to your point, I think people don't like what they don't understand. And this was, some of the other miracles, they could kind of wrap their head around, but somebody just essentially saying, be still, and the storm stops, or somebody taking those demons and commanding them to do something, and them doing what he says, I think that was too hard for them to necessarily wrap their minds around. However, what I'm taking for question number 4 here is, I have a lot of things going on in my life, some things I'm struggling with. I have never been in the middle of the sea in a boat that I thought was going to be overrun and sunk. I have never been possessed by 1,000 demons or had somebody constantly accosting me who was possessed by 1,000 demons. So what my takeaway is that I need to have more trust in God. Not ask him to go away. I need to draw him closer, because if our God can handle these things, if our God has the power over these things, there is nothing that he can't get us through. And that is so very hard. Because in the moment, I know people have bigger problems than I have, but in the moment, the problems that are mine.
They're big.
And they're big to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes I think we allow our problems to be bigger than God. Not that they are bigger than God, but we allow them to be bigger than God. And we allow that to diminish our faith. And I think these stories are to remind us that nothing is bigger than our God.
So they should remind us that if God can do that, whatever I'm facing in my life right now, God can help me with that as well. And even though it might be difficult, God walks with me. Jesus walks with me through these difficult times, and he will help me. And he can take care of them. How you don't have a problem, and you've never had a problem, and you never will have a problem in this life that is too big for God to take care of, or it is even challenging for him. I mean, there's nothing that we've gone through. Now, that doesn't minimize our suffering. We suffer as people. But let's put it in perspective of God can walk with me through this and help me with this storm, whatever that is. So I don't need to send him away. I need to draw closer to him, because he's really the only one that can help me through these storms. And that's hard as human beings, because our problems are real. Our problems are, they are painful. And that's what this earth is all about. So let's go to the next couple stories. So after he leaves, he goes back to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. When he gets there, guess what's waiting for him? A bunch of people. There's just a bunch of people waiting. And when he comes out, the leader of the synagogue runs up to him, falls down at his feet, and says, "My daughter is about to die. Come help." Now, we don't have time to draw this thing out, but just think, if you had a 12-year-old daughter lying in the hospital hooked up to all these machines, and everybody said, the doctor said, "Call in your family, she's going to die." And so in their life, everybody's there at the house, right? Because they know she's clinging to life and she's not going to last much longer. Well, Brian has talked about this in the last couple of weeks about the Lord's Supper, so we can't go into all the details. One is that he meets with this lady with a flow of blood, and she's had this flow of blood for 12 years. She's seen doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and no doctor is able to give her any kind of permanent relief. As a matter of fact, she spent all of her money, so she's broke, and she's not getting better, she's getting worse. And so maybe she's heard these stories, and she goes, "You know what? If I could just touch the hem of his garment, I am just sure that I'll be healed." And so I can't imagine what's going through her head as she's weaving between the people, trying to get close enough. And she gets close enough to Jesus, and she just reaches out and touches the hem of her garment, and immediately she can feel it in her body. I'm healed. She knew it. And so her goal was to touch his garment and sneak away. That's what she wanted to do. She didn't want to be known. She didn't want anybody to see her. But Jesus stopped the crowd and said, "Who touched me?" And his apostles said, they didn't say it like this, but it's almost say like this: "That's a dumb question, Jesus." I mean, the way that it's described is that people were pressing on him. And you ask us to find out who touched you? Everybody who's within arm's length is touching you. And this crowd keeps shifting, and everybody keeps touching you. He goes, no. Somebody touched me intentionally, and I felt the power leave me. And so this woman who wanted to get away secretly realizes she's been found out, comes before Jesus, again, on the ground, and tells him everything. And he takes that moment to say, "Be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And so now this lady doesn't have to sneak away. And it's interesting. Let's just keep these two things in mind. There's going to be other passages that we come across where people go and touch Jesus to be healed. This lady started something. And the next time Jesus goes to the Decapolis, where this guy was, they meet him there. They don't ask him to leave. When he gets out of the boat, they're wanting to touch him. They're wanting to be healed by him. So that guy had a huge effect on the rest of the story. Sometimes we don't connect those dots, but they're huge situations here. So now, Jesus, as he heals this lady, some people from the synagogue official's house come running up to him and say, "Hey, your daughter's dead." Now, hopefully you've read these. Please read these and read the different accounts that go along with them, because they piece together really impressive narrative, where it says, one version says Jesus basically ignored. The other version said Jesus told the man, "Don't worry," immediately told the man, "Don't worry, if you believe, your daughter will live." So what can appear to be Jesus isn't really considering what's going on right now, to one person, may be to someone else. Yeah, he said something, and they continue to walk. So as they walk to this, just think of this multitude. These stories are building. These stories are building. The lady's just been healed, 12 years, and they're all following Jesus, and Jesus stops the multitude. Peter, James, and John, come with me. He goes into the house, wailing, the girl is dead, and they're mourning. They're crying. And Jesus says, quit the weeping. She's not dead. She's only asleep. And they mock him. We know what death looks like. She is dead, and you're telling us she's not dead. I'll just say this now so I don't forget. I think this is such a masterful thing that Jesus did here. Because what is Jesus doing by making them argue with him that this girl is dead? No, she's dead. We know she's dead. How are they going to argue that he didn't raise her now? Isn't that amazing? I just think that was a masterful way that he did this. If I get them to argue this case with me, that they're going to argue the case that she's dead. She was dead, by the way. They're going to argue the case that she was dead. They're on record saying, no, she's dead. We know what that looks like. So when they find out she's not dead any longer, they can't come back and say, hey, maybe she wasn't really dead. No, they've already argued that case. I think that was intentional on Jesus' part, just to let them know what was taking place. So Jesus only takes them into the room. He says to the little girl to wake up. She wakes up. He says she's hungry. Give her something to eat. They give her something to eat. But then he tells them, don't tell anybody. And it says they were amazed beyond measure. They just couldn't believe what just happened. And spend some time with that story this week, how you would react in that same situation. You thought your 12-year-old was going to die. Your 12-year-old did die. I mean, it was like, just think of being in the hospital, and all of us are in the waiting room. And you're in there with your daughter, 12 years of age, and all of a sudden, the heart monitor, beep. And then Jesus comes in and raises her up, and all of a sudden, you have the heart monitor goes back up. She unplugs herself and gets up and eats something and goes about her way. How impactful this would have been for you. Okay, so let's... And there's a couple more occasions of healing. He comes through, and there's two blind men who say some pretty amazing things. They call him Son of David. That's significant, right? He has this is a point. Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, everybody, they all did agree on this, that the Messiah had to be the Son of David. And so these guys are crying out, Son of David, have mercy on us. And Jesus asks them a question, do you think I can do this? And the answer comes back, yes. Now, I know we've talked about this before. Faith or trust has two elements to it. You have to believe that the person you have trust or confidence in is able to do something and that they are willing to do something. You know, if somebody is able to help you but they're not willing to help you, can you really have trust and confidence in them? Or if they might want to help you, but they can't help you, you really can't trust them either, right? And so to have true trust in someone, they have to be able to help you, and they have to be willing. They have to love you enough to help you. And that's what Jesus describes in this occasion, where he does tell them, he touches their eyes, they're healed, and then there's a demon-possessed man who cannot speak. He casts the demon out, and the demon can now speak. So out of all these healing lessons, the lady raising Jairus' daughter from the dead, and these guys, what do we learn about God, Christ, or ourselves from these stories? Or what things can we use to our own life? What would you have been thinking if you were there? All right. Joy has one. Charisma has one. All right, get the microphone, Joy. We need to hear what you're saying.
Okay, I think that seeing these things would convince me that this was a Son of God. And what I need to do is have enough faith that by reading these examples, that will increase my faith as much as if I had been there.
Okay. And that's why Luke was writing and why John was writing, right? They specifically meant, I've compiled this account of all these people so you know what eyewitnesses saw, and it should be powerful to you. And John personally testified, I've seen these things with my own two eyes, and I am writing to you so that you may believe in the same way that I believe. Charisma?
You kind of realize from all of these accounts, like God can take any circumstance and make it a lesson, make it like he can heal anybody, he can do anything. And just kind of knowing that makes it easier to, like, any kind of circumstance, you can get through it because God can handle it.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's where we all need to be. God is also patient with people as they learn, because Jesus understands that there are real problems on this earth. There are real struggles that people go through. He witnessed that. He experienced some of them, and so he's patient with us as we learn these things, as our faith grows. He was patient with them, because how many times, if you were Jesus, would you say, "Come on, guys! I mean, look, I've done all these things over and over and over again, and you're worried about this?" And maybe he does do that a little bit here and there, but he's patient with people too. So in the moment when we're going through something, I think God understands, and because Jesus understood what it was like to be human, he understands what it's like to be in that moment. And he's patient with us in those moments as we allow the moment to sink in and the faith to grow in that moment. I hope that makes sense. Here's a couple things that I come up with. First, Jesus was so good at seeing individuals and not crowds. All right, so you have large crowd. All writers say, this is a large crowd. What does he do? He takes time for one guy, and then he takes time for one woman. Then he takes time for two guys who are possessed by demons, or blind, and then he takes time for one guy that is demon-possessed. I think that's amazing about Jesus. And one thing why I think that's so amazing is he perfectly lived what he was teaching. What was he teaching? A shepherd has 100 sheep. One goes missing. What does the shepherd do? He cares for that one sheep. Are not two sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground unless your Father knows about it and cares about it? You're worth way more than that. God knows your name. God knows how many hairs are on your head. So although God looks down and sees a bunch of billions of people, he also sees one person, and he also helps that one person. Because people are important to Jesus. Individual people are important to Jesus, not just crowds. And I love that about Jesus. And what did Jesus come to do? He came to show what God was and how God lived. Jesus helps desperate people who turn to him humbly. You have a lady who's broke. You have a man whose daughter was dying and did die. You have people who can't see. You have people who are possessed by demons. And Jesus was able to help all those situations when people came seeking for him. And a lot of these occasions, they come falling at his feet begging. And we don't live in a begging society. We have too much pride for that. If you have too much pride to beg God and to beg Jesus, you have way too much pride. And I think that's what these stories are showing. If you need help, don't think you can handle it, because you can handle it. God can handle it for you, and God can help carry that load with you. And then Jesus gave people, he trained people. And so, I want to learn about myself, and I think this goes with what Joy was saying. Man, sometimes I have all these stories, and I should handle things better than I do. And I need to let these stories sink in a little bit more and realize the same God that did that still has the power to help me. And I need to trust him, and I need to let my faith be built up. Well, he goes back to Nazareth, his hometown, and when he gets there, he's teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath. And the people are like, wow, where did he learn all this stuff? And how does he have the power to work miracles? So he's back at his hometown. They saw him grow up. And they're like, this is just the carpenter. And it is interesting that in at least one of the accounts of the Gospels, it doesn't say he's the carpenter's son. He says he's the carpenter. I do find that interesting. Jesus spent some time working with wood. However long that was, I don't know. But he, with his hands, worked with wood, did some stuff. That's the carpenter. And his sisters are here. His brothers still live here. And they didn't believe in him. And so Jesus says, no one is without honor in his own country. And it says they scoffed at him. They were offended by him. And so Jesus basically only could do a few miracles. And then he left. He went village to village teaching. He takes his 12 disciples, he commissions his 12 disciples, he sends them out in pairs, and he gives them the authority to cast out evil spirits, heal, and raise people from the dead. I can't even imagine that. Could you imagine? You've seen all this so far, and Jesus says, all right, I'm giving you this power now. I would feel totally inadequate for this. I would feel like, oh, what in the world am I going to do with that much? And I might feel a little afraid. Do I really want to cast out demons, knowing that they're going to say I'm casting out demons by the power of the demons? That's sort of difficult. But they go out and they do it. They cast out demons. They perform miracles. They even raise people from the dead. They come back to Jesus to tell Jesus, and they're all excited about this, as you can imagine. I mean, you don't believe what we did, Jesus. There was this one demon, this person had been suffering this demon forever, and I just cast them out by your name, and it left. There was this person that was sick. I touched him, healed them. There was even a little boy that was dead, and I raised him from the dead with the power that you've given me. How exciting would that be? And that is another human thing that Jesus went through, the running of two emotions. Because while he's hearing this incredible news, he hears some bad news. Your cousin, John, has been executed by Herod. And so Jesus has to process that. He has to process that as a human being, and has to process that emotion in a divine way. And so, how would you process that moment? What would you want at that particular moment? How many of you would want to be left alone? All right? And that's what Jesus wanted. He wanted to be left alone. And they had been so busy that day, they hadn't even had a chance to eat. So Jesus is hungry. His disciples are hungry. His disciples were excited, and that excitement just plummeted when they found out John the Baptist had been executed by Herod. And now Jesus, have you ever just had the wind knocked out of you in a way that you just couldn't believe? And that's where he is at this moment. And so he says, let's go find an isolated, deserted place. All right, so what do we learn from that last couple sections? We have 2 minutes. Anybody? All right, Roy has something.
Just something else that's interesting. It was more difficult for the people that knew him growing up to recognize who he was. And it's also interesting that he didn't perform very many miracles around them.
He healed a few sick people.
Right.
Yep.
But it is interesting that it was those that had seen him and knew him that found it more difficult to recognize who he was.
And that is it good, but isn't that human? Isn't that somebody that you've seen growing up and you don't have high expectations necessarily? He's just a carpenter. He didn't go to seminary, he didn't go to college, he didn't have a PhD. He wasn't the kid that you would pick out when he was 12 and say, man, that kid is a genius. He's going to go make something of himself. He was an ordinary man. Isn't that part of the story, right? And so I think if I were one of those people, I might have unfortunately dismissed Jesus too, knowing him as a child. And so we have to be careful about that. Anything else? All right, so that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll pick up with, I think we have a singing this Wednesday night. And then next Sunday, Roy will pick up where we left off, Jesus looking for a quiet place of solitude to go mourn the death of his cousin, who was also his forerunner.